Good evening, folks, and welcome to this special edition of Crypto IQ News, where we break down the biggest stories impacting your money and the markets. I'm Leo, your host, and tonight we're zeroing in on a high-stakes showdown that's got Wall Street buzzing and Washington in an uproar. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell just dropped a bombshell video statement that's not only defending his actions, but calling out what he sees as a direct threat to the independence of the Fed itself. If you've got investments, a mortgage, or just care about where the economy's headed, this is must-watch territory. Stay tuned as we unpack every angle. And hey, if this kind of in-depth coverage keeps you coming back, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below. Do you think Powell's standing his ground, or is this political theater? Let's keep the conversation going. Let's start with the basics for anyone tuning in who might not follow the Fed like it's their favorite sports team. Jerome Powell has been the chair of the Federal Reserve since 2018, appointed initially by President Trump, but confirmed by the Senate to lead this crucial institution. The Fed, for those who need a quick refresher, is basically the heartbeat of the US economy. They control interest rates, manage inflation, and aim for maximum employment, all while trying to stay above the political fray. Powell's no stranger to controversy. He's navigated everything from the COVID-19 economic meltdown to recent debates over how fast to cut rates in a recovering economy. But this latest twist? It's on another level. To understand why Powell's statement is such a big deal, we need to rewind a bit to the ongoing tensions between the Fed and the White House. President Trump has been vocal, and I mean very vocal, about wanting the Fed to slash interest rates faster and deeper. He's tweeted about it, spoken about it in interviews, and made it clear he thinks lower rates would supercharge growth, help with borrowing costs for businesses and families, and maybe even boost the stock market. Remember, lower rates make loans cheaper, which can stimulate spending and investment, but they also risk overheating the economy or sparking inflation. Powell and the Fed have pushed back, insisting their decisions are data-driven, not politically motivated. This friction isn't new. Presidents from both parties have griped about the Fed over the years, but it's escalated dramatically in recent months. Now, enter the spark that lit this fire. A massive $2.5 billion renovation project at the Fed's headquarters in Washington, D.C. This isn't just some office makeover. It's a multi-year overhaul of historic buildings that Powell testified about before Congress last June. During that Senate Banking Committee hearing, he discussed the project's costs, timeline, and necessity. Things like updating infrastructure for security and efficiency. But critics, including some in the administration, questioned whether the Fed was being transparent about the spending. Was it really essential, or was it bloated bureaucracy? Fast forward to Friday, and boom. The Department of Justice serves the Fed with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment tied directly to Powell's testimony on this project. Sources say the probe is looking into whether there was any misleading information or lack of full disclosure during that congressional appearance. But here's where it gets explosive. Powell didn't just hunker down. He went public with a video statement late Sunday evening, January 11th, framing this not as a legitimate oversight check, but as outright intimidation. Let me read you the key parts of what he said, because this is the kind of language you rarely hear from a Fed chair. Quote, "On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned in part a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings." He goes on, "I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure." Powell doesn't mince words here. He calls the renovation angle a pretext, insisting the real issue is the Fed's refusal to bend to political demands on interest rates. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president, he states. and he wraps it up defiantly. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people. That's powerful stuff, right? It's like Powell's drawing a line in the sand, saying the Fed's independence is non-negotiable. You sent. Now, you're probably asking, what does this mean for the markets? Well, futures dipped immediately after the news broke Sunday evening. Stock indexes and the dollar took a hit as investors digested the uncertainty. Gold and Bitcoin, often seen as hedges against fiat system drama, got a bump, with some analysts calling this the best advertisement for alternative assets. Remember, the Fed's next rate decision is looming, and any whiff of political interference could spook global investors who rely on the US dollar's stability. If rates stay higher longer because of this standoff, it could mean tougher times for homebuyers, small businesses, or anyone with variable rate debt. On the flip side, if the pressure leads to faster cuts, we might see a short-term boom but long-term inflation risks. Either way, volatility is the name of the game right now. So if you're invested, keep an eye on your portfolio and consider diversifying. What do you think? Will this lead to lower rates sooner? Comment below and let's discuss. Shifting gears to reactions. This story exploded on social media and in political circles. On X, formerly Twitter, posts are flying in from all sides. Investor Anthony Pompliano shared the video, noting Powell's commitment to his role despite the probe. Macro analyst Dario called it a hammer blow to fiat credibility, boosting gold and silver talk. Republican Senator Tom Tillis blasted the administration, saying it erodes the DOJ's credibility and confirms pushes to end Fed independence. On the other hand, some Trump supporters cheered the investigation, calling for accountability on the renovation spending. Even overseas, reactions poured in. One Chinese outlet highlighted it as a sign of US internal strife. It's clear this is polarizing. Defenders see Powell as a guardian of economic stability, while critics view the Fed as an unelected powerhouse needing check you sent. Let's bring in some historical context to see why this feels so unprecedented. The Fed was designed to be independent precisely to avoid this kind of mess. Think back to the 1970s stagflation era, when political meddling worsened economic woes. Presidents like Nixon pressured the Fed, leading to boom-bust cycles. Trump himself has echoed that, telling NBC he had no direct knowledge of the DOJ actions, but renewing his calls for rate cuts. Analysts like Damian Bowie from Wilson Asset Management say Powell's direct response marks a shift from his usual measured approach, addressing the elephant in the room head-on. This could test the limits of executive power versus institutional autonomy in ways we haven't seen since Watergate. What about expert takes? Economists are split. Some, like those at Reuters, warn this raises the stakes for Fed independence, potentially eroding investor confidence worldwide. Others point out that while the probe focuses on the building project, Powell's framing ties it to broader rate policy fights, which could rally support from both parties who value a nonpartisan Fed. Vanex Matthew Siegel noted Bitcoin edging higher amid the headlines, seeing it as a vote for decentralized alternatives. And from a legal standpoint, Powell's term as chair ends in May, but his board seat runs until 2028. So resignation isn't immediate, but the pressure's on. So, what does all this mean for everyday Americans like you and me? If the Fed buckles, we might get quicker rate relief, easing credit card bills or car loans, but lose independence, and we risk wild economic swings driven by election cycles rather than data. This story's far from over. Watch for congressional hearings, market swings, or even Supreme Court involvement if it escalates. Powell's vowed to fight on, but the administration's response could come any day. Before we wrap, a quick shout-out. If you're loving this breakdown and want more real-time analysis on economic bombshells, subscribe now. We're talking exclusive interviews, market tips, and live Q&As. Hit like if you support Fed independence, comment your predictions below, and share this with a friend who's into finance. Your engagement keeps us going strong. Thanks for watching. I'm Alex Rivera, and we'll see you next time on Financial Frontier News. Stay informed, stay ahead. Good night.